Conversations Vermont. My name is Allison Teague. I'm a freelance reporter with the Commons News out of Brattleboro. We're going to be talking today about part of the picture that makes up heroin addiction and the issues here in Vermont. We have guests Deputy Editor Randy Holhut from the Commons, as well as Deb Witkus from Greater Falls Connections, who is the parental prevention and recovery. Is that what you are?
No, I'm community outreach coordinator.
Okay, all right. I got your name off of the website, and
oh yeah,
it still has.
Updated,
yeah. Okay. This show came out of some articles that I had written this summer, starting in June, on heroin. Which I started as a result of my reaction to the use of the word epidemic in Governor Shumlin's January 19th, or actually his January address, State of the State address to the state. And I was shocked. I live here in Saxons River in Rockingham, and I consider myself well informed, and I did not think there was a heroin addiction problem. So I started looking into it. I started at the top down at the state level, and then I tried to tie it into local actual facts, and found out that there is indeed an epidemic of heroin in the state. So since then, the governor has taken this on. He had a drug forum in January, and in June, statute 295 for risk assessment by a third party was passed. And then in August, there was a budget cut of $31.28 million, which brings us up to the present, and that happens to it happens to affect the recovery and treatment aspect of this. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more today. We want to bust the myths. There's a lot of rumors out there. There's a lot of disinformation. So in the service of both of those things, we're going to be exploring those. So today, Randy, can you bring us up to date on what Governor Shumlin's September 23rd press release had to say?
Well, not much more than what he was saying in January. I think he was trying to prove that he was doing something about the epidemic, since he staked so much of his political capital on it. Everyone's eyebrows went up when he devoted the bulk of his State of the State address to an epidemic of drug abuse, particularly heroin, and people wondered why. Why are you doing this? And the data is still kind of muddy about the extent of the epidemic in Vermont. But you know, the old saying that anecdotes don't equal facts, and everyone's got anecdotes about drug use in the state and what they think they know, but the data suggests something else. And from what we're seeing, yes, there's a lot of it coming up from southern New England. Yes, it's a bull market in southern Vermont, because the markup for heroin from Springfield and Hartford into Brattleboro and BF is at least 4 times. And the police are trying to do something, but you know, you push here, it's like a balloon, it just pops up somewhere else. But the main thing that's been done, and Vermont positioning itself as a leader in that regard, is trying to take the problem out of the criminal justice system and put it into the medical setting where it belongs, and treating it as not a crime but a chronic health condition. And that's what the legislation that was passed this session helps do, to try and take the low-level offenders who shouldn't be in jail, but had been going to jail, and assessing exactly where they should be. Is it appropriate to send this first-time person caught with any kind of illicit substance to jail? Is it more appropriate to say put them into a treatment setting? Is it more appropriate to just treat it as a misdemeanor, like what the direction it's going with marijuana? Is it more appropriate to put them in prison because they are a danger to the community? And trying to give trying to give the criminal justice system more flexibility to do something. But you can only do treatment if there's places to go. And at the news conference that Governor Shumlin gave at the Central Vermont Medical Center in Berlin, outside Montpelier, he touted that there are now 800 more spots for treatment in Vermont. Sounds good, but that's still kind of a fraction of what's needed. He also talked about how there's now a kind of coalition of most of the northeastern states that are trying to join forces because it's a problem in Massachusetts and Connecticut and Rhode Island and New York. And it's an interstate problem, and it has to be dealt with in an interstate manner. And trying to find just other ways of doing it to try and solve the problem. It's a big problem. People see it around, but what do you do?
Yeah, I think one of some of the statistics are important to understand, and that is that the cost-benefit ratio of investing in recovery is for every $1 invested, it saves $3 to $8 in costs of health care in the criminal justice system, and also lost productivity. And so in Vermont, we've seen a huge spike of drug-related deaths from 2012 to 2013. For heroin, it went from 9 to 20, and in terms of the age group that's most affected by this, it's 18 to 25-year-olds. And Vermont actually has a higher percentage of that than their Northeast New England states and the rest of the United States, by about 2 to 3%. I think one of the things that we're coming to understand in terms of all of the forums that have come out, beginning with the governor's forum, which was just so comprehensive, and it actually started the conversation, got it out in the open, and so people are starting to talk about it now. It's not, there's not so much denial. Even people that prior to that forum would not have spoken about it or have not understood the mechanics or the chemical part of the physiological part of heroin addiction are now beginning to talk about it, want to talk about it more. And I think there's the treatment, there's the prevention, or there's the prevention, treatment, and then recovery. And all of those pieces have to do with the community. So we can, and willingness to recover. I mean, an addict has to want to recover first. And that, as we saw in last week's article in the Commons on Jedediah Pop, he relapsed, like probably 10 times at least in his on his way to recovery, and that has to be really hard, both personally, but also if you are amongst family or friends, or you're trying to carry on a job or whatever it is, and people are seeing you relapse. So there's this stigma that's involved in that.
I just wanted to interject because I think this is really important for us to understand as a community, specifically around relapse. Relapse is not a lack of will. Relapse occurs because of the brain is still addicted. And it takes, based on what the substance is, it takes different amount of time for the brain to recover. And I know I was recently at training through the Vermont Kin as Parents up north, and there was an addiction researcher there from Dartmouth, Hitchcock, and he had said it takes, I believe it was opioids, at least 5 years for the brain to recover, and that's just like the neurobiology of addiction. That doesn't include the social and emotional, the stigma, all the bridges that have been burnt. So I just want to interject that, because so often,
and especially with Jed's story, I mean, everyone has their own addiction story, and I had a chance to talk to Jed when I was taking the pictures that went with Allison's story, and the tale of just craving the drug to the exclusion of everything else, and having your whole life fall apart around you, and knowing your whole life is falling apart around you, and not being able to do anything about it because of the pull of the drug, and how much it takes to get out of the bed that he was stuck in, and to take the step. I mean, he almost burned down his apartment. He overdosed twice. He did every possible thing you could do wrong as an addict, and survived, because he wanted. There comes the point you hit the bottom, or you hit the realization that, man, I'm messing up. I got to do something about this.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand the physiological aspect of this, because without understanding that, you just don't have any idea what that struggle is. And I didn't know, for instance, that our body is wired for opiates. I had no idea about that. And understanding that we produce our own natural endorphin opiate sort of substance that's called the runner's high, or the whatever you want to call it, we're already pre-wired to that. So somebody who is prescribed pain medications for anything from a dental procedure to one-day surgery to, somebody like, I just talked to somebody who had both knees replaced, and she's on opiates for pain medication. And how long does it take to get addicted to opiates?
It is, of course, one of the quickest drugs where you can form an addiction. And I won't be able to state this correctly. I was looking for the data that I quoted the other day, and I couldn't find it to have it on hand. But it's like a few days to a week. It's very, very, very quickly.
It's about a 2-week window, that where if you take it longer than that, and the danger really increases exponentially. But that's part of the problem of why there is a heroin epidemic in Vermont.
Exactly.
Because of the overprescription of painkillers. And for just about any surgical procedure, there's pushing Percocets and Oxy on you.
Right.
And you start taking it to relieve the pain, and then all of a sudden you find out how much the stuff costs, and suddenly hey, heroin, it costs less. I can get the same effect. Why don't I do heroin instead?
Well, there's two other things that come into play with that. And first and foremost, I want to say we have to understand that most physicians just don't want us to be in pain. And they're coming out of a good place. The American Pain Management Society in the past had recognized that we were really undertreating people for chronic pain, especially chronic pain.
Yeah.
And anyhow, so they originally came out of just wanting to. We can't demonize a whole profession here.
Well, but still, the painkillers are being overprescribed.
Oh, absolutely, and that's why the CDC has come out with new protocol around pain management.
What's the CDC?
The Center for Disease Control.
Okay.
So physicians across the country are getting wonderful new recommendations. In addition to that, they're also getting training on how to spot someone who might have be at risk for addiction, because that's something you need to know.
And how do you spot that?
Well, I don't have that right in front of me. I could talk a lot from the prevention lens about risk and protective factors, which I guess I should save until later.
Yeah,
that's what you wanted me to do.
Yeah, we're moving into that.
Okay. I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, who is most at risk?
First and foremost, if you have a history in your family, you are 50% more likely to use of substance abuse. If your family members are using, your chances of using, you're just modeling if your parents are using to self-medicate, coping, or maybe that was their learned behavior
Right.
of how to deal with stress in life, then you're 50% more likely to use. Of the 50%, I would imagine of that 50% who are most likely to use, we know that gender-wise, they're statistically speaking, our boys are way more at risk. If you have a learning disability, if you're on an IEP or 504, which means your ability to think and make decisions is
Can you
somewhat
explain
impaired.
those terms, IEP?
Oh, sure.
and 504?
Individual educational plan, and those are specifically set up for kids who might have difficulty learning impulse control, delayed gratification, basically being able to think through and make choices rather than kind of be reactive and impulsive. So those kids are at risk. Also, kids who have ADD and ADHD, whether it's because of the stigma or their attempt to self-medicate. We also know that conflict in the home is a huge predictive behavior.
So how much would you say is environment? How much would you say is a genetic or physical predisposition to addiction?
Well, I only have one answer: epigenetics. I think we can no longer say either or. I think there's an amazing study that was done at the Vermont UVM Medical School, and they tracked twins, and they did also a review of longitudinal studies of twins, specifically for genetic expression and predispositions. And to make a long story short, and I'm not a scientist in any way, I just love to read this literature because it really informs our work. And what they found out is the environment shapes the expression of genes. So we know cortisol, when your stress levels are up, that actually affects your brain's ability to develop in a healthy way. And that means basically the thinking versus feeling brain, being able to make choices, make plans, prioritize, kind of live life, negotiate life. And so that's what gets compromised. And so once your cortisol levels are up, what that means is you are going to be way more reactive, way more, not being able to negotiate, and it actually it affects genetic expression. So if you have a gene for depression, which they identified in this study in your family, which is also another predictor of use, is mental health and substance use within the family, the chances of that gene being expressed in a stressful environment, goes way up.
So if you're dealing with a stacked deck like
Sure.
that with environment and genetic predisposition, how does prevention come into addressing these two factors and reducing the risk of someone becoming addicted to substances?
It's a lot.
Yes.
But I think number one, identifying, knowing what the risk factors are is huge. Educating parents. Working with schools, to identify those kids on IEPs and 504s, not just in terms of them being successful academically, but how to create a partnership with home so you can help that family that doesn't have a clue. Because when you're raising a child who has challenges, you need more support to stop the cycle. So early intervention is crucial. Fortunately, we are very resilient. And there's like a whole other field that, based on the protective factors, which is resiliency, where we can do interventions to reduce the stress, to support and strengthen the families. The environment can change that, the environments that we create. The schools that welcome in families in recovery or parents who are using and say, you know what, come on in here, you're part of our community, let us help you, let us be part of, solving the problems. But I just don't want to, we put too much pressure and too much stuff on our schools. I just have to say, we have to step up.
Yeah, so the community aspect of it is the part I think that we want to key into here, because as a newspaper, we can inform and we can educate and we can bust some of those myths, and we can touch people that aren't necessarily going to be touched in another way by that education. And so we have all of these Greater Falls connections. We have Turning Point. We have. Can you talk about some of the resources that are out there, from the prevention to the treatment to prevent? You know, I don't know how you want to frame it.
Starting at treatment and
yeah.
Okay, so that's. Okay, that's not necessarily my, experience, but because it's so important for us to view this in a kind of holistic way.
Absolutely.
We are actually partnering with Turning Point Recovery Center of Vermont. And it's really hard in rural communities because we tend to have these, there's Turning Point up in Springfield and Turning Point in Brattleboro, and nothing here in Bellows Falls because it's a rural community and we don't have those kinds of resources. So what we're starting to do is partner so that we can bring some of those resources here, because the number one, transportation is a huge barrier to treatment and recovery.
Right.
So they're sharing recovery coaches, which we're going to be having at Parks Place.
Okay.
And we are the first.
What are recovery coaches?
Recovery coaches, gosh, there's so much to say here.
Yeah.
Recovery coaches are basically kind of like a paradigm shift in recovery based on the science, based on what we know about how peers affect another person's ability to sustain and maintain recovery, to reduce slips and stuff like that. So it's based on the peer model where, somebody who's walked in your shoes can, probably hold your hand in a way that nobody else can.
Okay.
The wonderful thing about recovery coaches is it would include NA and AA. That's part of it. That's kind of, but also along with that is coming up with recovery plans. Coming up with, the recovery coach will help you identify, what your triggers are, help you to work on how do you become successful in the workforce.
Right.
How do you, keep a schedule, all those skills that you're going to need to maintain and sustain recovery.
Okay.
So it's fantastic stuff.
So could something like a recovery coach be on site in a business, for instance, if somebody was perhaps being trained or going back to a job for the first time following, their trail to recovery or their path to recovery?
We're only limited by our imagination, and I'm guessing that there
Yeah.
are, communities that are doing that already. I think it's a wonderful idea. It's good for your business, since 2 out of 3 families are affected by addiction. You want your employees to be well, do well, perform well, and having a recovery coach on site, seems to make a lot of sense to me. And I know there are some businesses within our community that are rising up, and some of them are owned by, those who are in long-term recovery who aren't necessarily can't want to maintain their anonymity because of the stigma associated with
Right.
addiction. But, it's starting to happen. There's a whole change going across the country as we learn more about addiction and we look at it through a more compassionate lens.
Can you draw a line between the connection between prevention and recovery?
Oh, sure. Well, if you, if 50% of kids are more likely to use, because their parents are using, then there's a spot right there for prevention to stop generational use, stop the cycle. If I'm working now with families in recovery, and I'm able to actually teach them about risk and protective factors, so they're parenting differently than they were parented. We know that connection, communication, and reducing conflict, those are the new skills that they can, and modeling appropriate coping skills are the new things new ways that parents in recovery can, use with their kids.
And I imagine those are some of the things that'll be discussed at the upcoming forum.
Yeah, part of the reason that we're also doing this particular show is that the Commons is hosting a forum modeled after the VY forum that was held I don't even know, was it a year ago?
A year ago.
Yeah, down in Brattleboro. Jeff Potter, the editor, is going to be the moderator. We have 4 panelists. The panelists are going to be Mickey Wiles from Burlington Labs. Burlington Labs in Williston, I believe, is where they're located. Has been employing people that are in recovery. So that is a really good person to have for the forum that is going to be focused on businesses and recovery and towards the purpose of engaging the whole community. Because I think there's been a lot of activity on the professionals' parts, and then sort of the part that where the addict is coming back out in recovery into the community is the part that the the community can really step up and do. So we're also going to have 2 other panelists. One is from the Turning Point in Springfield, and then we're also going to have a nurse practitioner who's also from the Springfield medical community, and
That's Jim Walsh.
Jim Walsh, yeah. So. And then Jed is going to come up and talk to us about what it's like to be Randy's. Talk about what it's like to be an addict on this end of recovery.
Sure.
And one of his experiences was that after he went on a radio show for sometime this summer. He had a job, but the employer let him go because he found out that he was in recovery from heroin. So there's definitely a stigma. I mean, almost no employer is going to ask you if you're a recovering alcoholic or if you're recovering from cigarette, tobacco, or a lot of other things. So, and this forum, I hope, there's a lot more questions out there than answers, and
Sure.
I'm hoping that out of this forum, people will be able to ask questions. The business community, which has been invited through the Chamber of Commerce, who is also supporting us, and the Rotary is behind us on this forum. Every business that I went to along Main Street in the square was squarely behind it. The forum is going to be on October 9th from 5:30 to 7:30 at the Flatiron Exchange at 51 the Square. And so I think we're going to have, this is a really good opportunity for the Rockingham, Bellows Falls, Saxons River community, business leaders especially, to come and talk about what their concerns are, what their questions are, what resources are out there. We'll have all kinds of professionals in the audience who are coming from around the county and possibly the state as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. Do you want to tell us some of the, there's some movies?
Oh yeah,
and
sure. We've
events
got some
coming up?
stuff coming up. Kind of excited about that. Let's see, this tomorrow at 7 o'clock, we are hosting a screening of a very powerful and poignant documentary all about the anonymous people. There are over 23 million people who are in recovery, and they're silent because of the stigma. And this movie is all about hope and how that community is actually changing the discussion around addiction, treatment, and recovery. And it's part of a national movement. There are advocates who have authored a Recovery Bill of Rights because we need to get more funding for treatment.
Yep.
If we do not do that, it's just this cycle is
Right.
just going to continue to repeat. So that's 7 o'clock tomorrow at the library. We'll have some special guests. We're not doing panelists, we're doing stories, because stories is what we've discovered really moves us to action.
Yeah.
When you hear that woman that you've seen walking, who just got out of rehab or prison, when you hear the story about how she was abused as a child or how she was beaten as a wife, the trauma that's usually associated
you know,
Right.
the underlying trauma or mental health issues that are associated with substance abuse. When you hear those stories, that's when we truly learn what we can do to address these issues.
Okay. Is
Oh,
there-
more stuff. I
Yeah.
can go on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ah, okay, I had too much coffee this morning, can you tell? Okay, Saturday we're going to be at the BFPD collecting prescription drugs at the drop box there from 10 to 2.
So what kind of prescription drugs would those be?
Oh, we do, it's just pills, no liquids nor needles. So we'll be doing that. Laura Scherbaum, our director, will be there
Okay.
working with Windham County Sheriffs. And the wonderful thing about that, the drop box is actually there permanently, but we use this twice a year to promote the fact that it's here and actually to talk about prescription drug abuse, because that's really, like you said, the connection between the over prescribing of painkillers and heroin this is one way we can reduce access.
Okay.
A few more things? Do
Yeah,
I have more time?
absolutely.
Okay, the other thing is the Vermont is doing Our Stories Have Power training, which is all about empowering those in recovery. He's laughing at me. Empowering those in recovery to tell their stories.
Yep.
So that's coming up. You can visit the Vermont Friends of Recovery website to get the details. There's going to be one in Brattleboro, which is October 28th, and that's just a day-long training. And I think that's all I'll give you for
Okay.
now. Please visit our website, our Facebook page. All our events are listed there.
And what is the website?
At www.greaterfallsconnections.org. I would
Okay.
actually encourage you just to go to the Facebook page.
Okay. Okay.
And one last thing, I
Yes.
swear. I just wanted to mention that oh my gosh, I totally, yeah.
Okay.
gone.
It'll come back
Yeah,
to you.
I'm in the over 40 club.
So one
Mm-hmm.
one of the things that we're doing also in collaboration with Fact TV is to run the Hungry Heart. I did ask Bess O'Brien
Mm-hmm.
if she would come down for the forum, and unfortunately she was busy.
Mm-hmm.
But she was the one that connected me with Mickey Wiles. So.
Oh, great.
So the Hungry Heart, if you haven't seen it, please do watch it. It is it really connects you with the addicts who are struggling with this and gives you the face. Because one of the other parts of this is that addicts are not in one social or economic or racial or ethnic or any of those groups or age group, really. I mean, you can say it's focused between 18 and 25, but really all ages are addicts at this point, have addicts within their age group. So we'll see you on October 9th. Take advantage of these movies that are being shown around, the Anonymous movie, One Voice.
Many Faces, One Voice is
Many-
part of a national recovery movement.
Okay, and if you can't find places to see these, you can Google them and find places to watch them online. You might have to pay a rental fee, but all of these movies are also available online. Stay tuned to the Commons News at www.commonsnews.org for our weekly news. We come out on Wednesdays. For our continuing coverage of news around the county, as well as, in this case, some features on heroin. So thank you very much. Thank you, Randy, for joining us. Deb, I'm so glad that you were here today.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time, as well as October 9th, downtown at the Flatiron.